something to write, and I will start. Just give me 1 second. Alright, so just to brief you guys on how this is going to work, pretty simple. So you'll have your opening speeches as usual. That's where you give all of your arguments and stuff like that. After which, and those speeches are for I think 4 minutes, right? Yeah, 4 minutes. You won't ask questions during the speech itself because it's only 4 minutes, right? So after each speech, so let's say Jayant finishes his speech for 4 minutes. Um, After that, I will give you 2 minutes time. Did I say 2 minutes? Sorry. Yeah, 2 minutes time. And that's when you can ask all of the questions that you need to ask. 2 minutes also includes the time to answer the question, right? So maybe if Paki is giving Jen the question, you can ask how many ever questions, no limit on how many questions you can ask, and how many ever you can answer in 2 minutes, you take that many questions. I'll also be marking you guys on how well you answer the questions and how well you give questions. And then Paki goes ahead and speaks for the next 4 minutes. That is the normal opening speech. And then once again, we have a 2 minute crossfire round or POI round, however you want to call it. So, yeah, any questions regarding the motion, regarding the format, etc.? Okay, cool. If that is the case, then
Just one question. The speech will be 2 minutes.
the speech will be 4 minutes.
Okay.
Do you need a couple of minutes to just prep? Okay, okay. So I'll tell you what, we will start at 8:06. Is that okay? Yeah? All right. You can also use that time to prepare things like what questions you might want to ask, etc. That's also completely fine. I'm just setting up the timer, so once you guys are ready, you guys can just let me know and I'd be happy. Oh, you're muted if you're saying anything. Oh, okay. Let me know when you're ready to start. I do know you were part of the event, so. Yeah, apologies. We had this switch at the last minute, so the volunteer wasn't able to conduct it. That's why I sent it that late. I should probably sent it earlier if I knew.
So should I start?
Bucky, are you ready? All right. I am not having the best internet, so I'll just turn off my camera during the speeches. But when I'm giving you guys feedback, I'll turn it on. Yeah, you can start. Just give me a reverse countdown so I can turn on the timer from my end also.
Okay, so I will start at my self count of three, two, and one. Respected judges, esteemed opponents. Imagine a world where 80 lakh people don't die from something entirely preventable. A world where children didn't suffer consequences of choices they never made. Today, we are in such a world because this world is full of smokers, of cigarette users. So today we propose such a world because this house will ban cigarettes. Let's begin with this undeniable truth. Cigarettes kill. According to WHO, World Health Organization, tobacco is responsible for over 8 million deaths annually, or 80 lakh deaths. That's shocking. And 1.3 million or 13 lakh of those deaths are innocent non-smoker who don't even smoke, who are victim of second-hand smokes. That's more than AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis combined. What other legal products kill to half of its users when used as intended? And let's not pretend smokers are the only one harmed. Every puff pollutes our environment and the lung of others, not just humans, but the lungs of numerous animals, numerous plants. Every discarded cigarette butt, one puts 4.5 trillion liter each year that pollutes our seas, our oceans with microplastics and poisonous marine life. Every acre of land used to grow tobacco leads to deforestation, soil degradation, and child labor in developing countries. Yes, cigarettes kill people, they kill forests, and they kill opportunity. Now, some argue that banning cigarettes will violate personal freedom, but let's be honest. It is. Is it really personal freedom when 90% of smokers start before age 18? Hooked by industry or FOMO that deliberately targets youth with flavored products and flashy ads? Is it freedom when nicotine addiction hijacks your brain, making it almost impossible to quit even when you desperately want to? True freedom means the freedom to live without addiction, cancer, or chronic diseases, not the freedom to poison yourself or others. And what about economic cost? In India alone, smokers led to illness drains over 300 billion US dollars each year in healthcare and lost productivity. Globally, the cost for every dollar earned through tobacco tax, governments spend three treating its consequences. So we ask, who is really paying the price? Some may say a full ban is unrealistic, but countries like Bhutan have already done it. And smoking bans in public places have been proven to reduce heart attacks, asthma, and hospital admissions, which the evidence is very clear. The action must follow this evidence. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't allow arsenic in candies. We don't allow
Time,
drunk drivers in roads. So
time. Your time is up. 4 minutes is over. You can conclude. You can finish the sentence.
So my conclusion is we should entirely ban cigarettes instead of banning them in public areas. We should ban them. This would in fact increase the GDP, increase the economy of country in long run, and also make people's health better and better in the long run. Thank you everybody for listening.
All right, thank you so much for that very fine speech. So we will move into the crossfire round now, which means that Paki will basically be questioning you with as many questions as she's able to ask and you're able to answer within 2 minutes. So you guys can unmute your mics just to not waste time there. So I will start it in the reverse count. I mean, start the time, 2 minutes, in the reverse count of 3, 2, 1. Go ahead.
So my first question to you is that when you give the example of Bhutan and how they have successfully banned cigarette, you fail to mention how still people are smoking cigarettes, but instead of legible companies getting their payment and economy boost, now black markets sales are being boosted and they are funding other criminal activities in Bhutan.
Okay, so the answer to your question is that Bhutan government has entirely banned cigarettes, but black market is flourishing. But Bhutan government is still keeping an eye on black market, which is reducing it quite drastically. That it was in 2020 and now it is in 2025. You could look at the graphs, you could look at the numbers. The black market has been reduced by Bhutan government and further international interference in Bhutan's economy, which is driving people's health better and better instead of smokers who are killing themselves by smoking cigarettes.
Now, as you talk about how you should like ban the smoking of cigarettes, so where does this ban end? Like there are many unhealthy things that we consume while being aware that they are unhealthy. So where does it end? Do we the next day when we wake up, will there be a ban on junk food? Will there be ban on paragliding? Because the amount of accidents because of paragliding or some extreme sports is so much higher than legible medical problems.
Okay, so ban actually don't stops here. Ban is actually going on for several things like alcohols, cigarettes, tobaccos, and tobacco products is actually making people's health better and better. But if you are talking actually about extreme sports, so that's what people are willing to do, what they are playing on their own life. If you talk about
I
F1
mean,
or
so is
paragliding,
cigarette. Very sorry to interrupt you, but so is cigarette.
Time up.
People are willingly doing
Time up.
it.
Yeah, the crossfire time is up. So you can definitely answer this question within your speeches, etc. So you can also integrate direct refutation within your points and also within like yeah. So give me 1 second. I will reset the timer and Paki whenever you're ready.
Okay, so I'll start with self count of 3, 2, 1. Today, I want to talk about a well-intentioned but flawed idea, banning cigarettes. While we all agree that smoking is harmful, prohibition is not the answer. You may ask why? Because history and human nature proves ban don't stop consumption. They just create bigger problems. Prohibition always fails, and this has been outlined by our history. When in America in 1920s, the government banned alcohol. Did it stop people from drinking it? No, the sales boomed. It was the gangsters that got rich, and people died from drinking unsafe alcohol. And fast forward to today, despite the war on drugs, narcotics everywhere, they are still being smuggled and has come out to be the biggest problems of today's world. If we ban cigarettes tomorrow, will the number of people, which has been roughly calculated to be about 1 billion, will they quit immediately? No. They will turn to black markets to feed their addiction, and the black market will thrive, selling unregulated, dangerous products. Would you rather people smoke legal cigarettes with health warnings or toxic bootleg ones? we let adults drink alcohol. They eat junk food, even extreme sports, all risky choices. Why single out smokers? Yes, smoking is harmful, but in a free society, adults get to decide what they do with their body, as long as they pay taxes and follow public smoking laws. And let's be honest, if someone's addicted, a ban won't cure them. It'll just make them criminals overnight. Tobacco supports millions of jobs from farmers to corner shops. Ban it and you'll create unemployment, chaos while handling the market to cartels. For example, Mexico's drug violence shows that what happens when prohibition funds criminals. Do we really want cigarette smugglers running our neighborhoods, putting the citizens in more dangers than cigarette would have ever proved to be? Now the question comes that is there a better way? We have multiple examples like Australia. They increase the taxes on cigarettes and thereby increasing the price of cigarettes, and which reduced smoking. People have also now come up with alternatives, which are the e-cigarettes, which are by margin so much less harmful to your health. And we as country should focus on education and smoking restrictions that reduce smoking rates. Sweden, for example, reduced smoking by promoting safer alternatives, not by prohibition. We should educate our citizens. We should put graphic warnings, which works better than jail time. And in conclusion, I would like to say that banning cigarettes won't make them disappear. It will only make them more dangerous. Let's focus on real solutions: education, harm reduction, and personal responsibility. Freedom means allowing adults to make their own choices, even if we disagree with them. Prohibition feels tough, but it's a lazy policy. Real leadership means giving people better options, not fake solutions. Let's fight smoking with science and smart laws. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that fine speech. We will stop the 2-minute crossfire now, so Jen, feel free to ask questions. I'm starting it in the backward count of 3, 2, 1.
So my first question to you, Paki, is you claim to support personal freedom amongst the youth of country. But when 90% of smokers are addicted before they even turn 18, often manipulated by tobacco marketing, do you really believe that's a free choice? Or are you defending an industry that profits from addiction and early death?
We are not defending any industry, because even if we have this ban, the people who have been already addicted, they'll turn out to other means. They'll not magically stop because of a ban or because of fear of smoking illegally. As we have already seen in the case of drugs, still young users are there. They get addicted because it is a prohibition, and especially young people, they feel rebellious trying it. So the prohibition solves nothing. Can you guarantee that because of this prohibition, that this when cigarettes get banned, that no person will turn to cigarette?
And my second question to you is, if cigarettes cost societies 3 times more in healthcare and lost productivity than they generate in tax revenues, and they are the leading cause of preventable death, then can you name one reason backed by evidence why they should stay legal?
See, that's what I'm trying to say. That banning cigarettes will not make the health, like the fatality because of cigarettes less. It will only increase it, because right now there are well-established companies that are producing cigarettes in somewhat hygienic way that is somewhat okay for citizens in long run. Of course, they'll have health effects eventually that will catch up to them, because in no way I'm saying that they are okay for your health. But if we ban it, then they'll go to illegal means, which is way worse.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Alright, thank you guys for that. I do realize there were no rebuttal speeches So sorry about that. I have some time constraints that because I have to leave by 8:30 and this is a last minute thing. But I will give you the verdict nevertheless. But just note that like because I wasn't able to test out your engagement directly within the round, right? There is definitely more room for debate. And I know through your POIs and stuff that you guys have more ideas that you're not able to express within just like one speech alone. So I completely do understand that. With that said, so I will just be giving the verdict. More so, I'll be focusing on personal feedback because that's far more important within this round because this is not a complete round per se, right? So my verdict goes to opposition, and I'll just start with personal feedback. So I'll go speech by speech. So I'll do the opening speeches first, and then I'll do the crossfire round, just pointing out what you guys could have done to kind of prevent those kind of responses, right? Firstly, on propositions opening speech, I think I was really good in terms of the problem statement, right? So you were able to go ahead and kind of prove to me that there is definitely a problem there. The issue then becomes you never prove how you solve the problem. Sure, 80 lakh people are dying every year. Completely understand. I like that kind of illustration that you're giving me. And you say 90% of people start before they're 18 years old. That makes sense. But what I don't get from your speech, and I next 1 second. What I don't get from your speech is how you're actually able to solve the problem in the first place, right? Because while you do tell me that all of these problems exist in society, so cigarettes are bad in and of itself, it is unclear to me then how banning this is magically going to solve these problems. I understand it's slightly intuitive in a sense where you're like, okay, so banning it literally means that these shops just cannot exist in the open anymore, which is inherently like, reducing the amount of supply you have, etc. But I think all of that analysis really had to be outrightly said, right? Because in debate, we don't make too many assumptions. We try and be as clear as possible because we just do not know if the judge is going to get it or not, right? So, general rule of thumb, even if it is something that is extremely obvious, like even if you say like red is a color, even if that is something that literally every human being knows, you still have to spell it out for the judge. So I would definitely say from now on, when you especially have this house would ban motions, you should definitely just try and prove solvency. Uh, by solvency, I just mean how you're solving the problem, right? The way you do this is through something called a model. So, in all parliamentary debate formats, we have something called a model. In this house with motions, you're basically representing the government in this house with motions. You don't have to write policy or anything, but this is not a policy forum, etc. A public forum, whatever. But in WCC, very simply, you just give a model. So maybe you say, okay, firstly, we will tax people. We will make taxes on cigarettes like maybe 50%, 60%, etc. Then we gradually phase it out, and using the tax money that we get, we go ahead and build things like rehabilitation centers. You see how that basically just sets up proposition to win very, very clearly, because at the point at which you're able to prove that addicted people can actually now get help because you're actually funding things like rehabilitation centers, which is incredibly important because the vast majority of developing countries don't have facilities like that. And secondly, there's a vast amount of stigma in going to facilities like that, right? That's why so many people are addicts, but they're still not like reaching out for help, right? Even though they very well know that they're devolving into this spiral that they can't get out of on their own. So that's one thing you can definitely say, and that basically helps prop case out a lot, because even if opposition then claims black market, it becomes that the amount of people who are still going to resort to the black market are incredibly small, right? Because when a vast majority of people can avail help, and now rehabilitation facilities are actually available to a vast majority of people, family pressure, social pressure is to go to these facilities and kind of get rehabilitated, right? That kind of helps these people and is able to also prove that even if not every single person, you're able to reduce like a lot of people from going there. The second thing I will tell you in as feedback for the speech is just to be more comparative and talk about what opposition's most likely model is. Modeling also applies to opposition, and I'll get to that in a bit, right? So you should probably be a lot more comparative. What is the likely opposition counterfactual, right? So if I was opposition and I had the ability to model, my model would be, look, we will tax these cigarettes, okay, and then we will like basically proposition model that I just told you, but I would say we can also do this on opposition. So we'd create rehabilitation centers, and we would also like strengthen the regulation when it comes to the tax industry as a whole. That way we're able to reduce the amount of cigarettes like a person can smoke. We would do things like, you know, make the age of smoking far higher, which is able to prevent all of these young kids from getting into smoking. And basically just regulation gets a lot better, right? Because the reason why opposition can win on this, like I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here, kind of balance it between both sides, is that you're able to prove, if you're opposition, if you can prove that if proposition has the amount of fiat is basically just power to do something, right? To go ahead and guarantee that cigarettes are going to be banned, in the sense that implementation of it is actually going to be good. So fiat is slightly weird, and I'm just going to spend some time explaining that. FIAT, if anyone is curious. In WSDC and other parliamentary formats, so WSDC, BP, AP, there's a bunch of parliamentary formats out there, some more popular than the others. Fiat is basically that you cannot question whether this policy will be implemented or not, right? So, for the context of this motion, you can't say, okay, so, you know, maybe North Korea will not implement this motion because North Korea is North Korea. That's not how fiat works, right? Generally, there's a consensus that this thing is going to happen. What you can question, however, is how well it's going to be implemented. So you can say that governments will pass the bill to go ahead and ban cigarettes, but then we're unlikely as to how good they're actually going to look over it, right? And I think some elements of that were there, but then I'll talk about that in a bit, right? So that's one thing you can do. So opposition's most likely counterfactual within this debate is probably going to be, we will tax it and then we will use the tax money that we get for funding things like rehabilitation centers to actually fix the problem at its root cause, right? You can't do that when you're banning it. I mean, if you're running a proposition counter model, you can still say we'll ban it, but generally, most proposition teams will just say we will outright ban it in a few years, right? So at that point of time, they're able to have some uniqueness and win the round. So that's why I'm just trying to give you guys both of the sides. But other than that, I think the opening speech is good. Just prove solvency and also be more comparative. So just think, I know I only sent this 10 minutes before the round started. So I don't expect you guys to like give your best here because the time to write your speeches were incredibly short, but this is just for any future debates that you get on the same motion, right? Um, Also on the crossfire, so that's Paki's questions to Jayant. The first question was on the example of Bhutan and also black market sale, if I'm not wrong, right? The first tip I would have is just do not get into examples, because then don't try and refute examples. Refute the analysis behind the example. Because when Paki asked you the question of Bhutan, they weren't like specifically asking, okay, so what did Bhutan do there, right? The larger part of the question was that black markets are still likely to exist. So don't try and just rebut what Bhutan did. Try and rebut that black markets are not going to be that popular. And I think it's very, very simple, right? So let's just talk about why this motion is unique from other kinds of this household ban motions. Because think about cigarettes, right? There is unique normalization of cigarettes in society. What that inherently means is that you can't take a break in between work to drink like a bottle or glass of alcohol, right? However, you can take a break between work to actually smoke. That means that there is general societal acceptance of smoking. It is part of things like work culture. At that point of time, okay, so the meeting will end in 10 minutes, so I think I will be able to wrap up within that. Any questions you can ask it in chat, but sorry, in WhatsApp. But yeah, the general like thing there is very, very simple, right? Because there's unique normalization. When you remove this normalization, people who are just casual smokers or who just smoke to relieve stress are now unlikely to smoke. Right? So that's a big part of like the people who smoke. We just shouldn't talk about addicts alone. You should also talk about like general people who aren't necessarily addicted, right? So we call them casual, you know how casual gamblers exist, right? Same way, casual smokers. On the second question, then we consume a bunch of unhealthy things. So, what makes it unique? Like I said, the answer to that was just that smoking is uniquely normalized in society. It is incredibly cheap to purchase, because if you want to have things like fine wine, obviously that costs a lot, right? But then a pack of cigarettes isn't that expensive, which makes it far more accessible to a lot of people. So moving on to Paki's speech, then I think this is generally a good speech. I would just tell you two things. Number one was the counter model. So, like I said, you can also counter model as opposition. You can use the same resources that proposition uses. That's fiat for opposition. You can't use more than that, but you can also use the same amount. The second thing is, I think that you had to be a lot more comparative. So, when you're telling me that, okay, so bans don't stop consumption, black market will still exist. I think there's a lot more room to talk about why black market is inherently bad, right? Firstly, people are less likely to actually talk about it at the point at which they're doing something illegal. So I get the point about how quality is going to be worse. I think that's a really, really important part of the argumentation that you have to give here. But then the second part of it is also when it becomes illegal, people just do not ask for help, right? So if I am doing something that is considered illegal, I don't ask my family to help me out, which means that even if it is necessarily true that I can get things like rehabilitation, I'm not going to go ahead and tell anyone that I'm doing this. I'm more likely to be secretive about it. Insofar as proposition literally concedes that 90% of smokers are under the age of 18, they're going to be far more like scared about that, right? Which means that all of the impacts that they talk about are probably much, much worse on like their side of the house at the point at which you make you ban all cigarettes and like anyone who sells a cigarette or has a cigarette is kind of like a criminalized in a sense, right? Even if we take the best case scenario and say that there's no legal consequence for doing it, there's still a social consequence at that point of time because you're basically acquiring it through like suspicious methods, right, to say the least. Overall, I think this is a good speech. So just be more comparative and always have a counter model. On the crossfire, like you probably shouldn't say that can you guarantee no person will use it, because it's very easy for proposition to come up here and say, well, even if like, yeah, sure, I will conclude it in 2 minutes. Even if like it is necessarily true that you're not able to stop everything, you're still able to stop some amount of it, right? So I think a better response to this is, you have things like rehab centers, etc., for which is basically like on the model. So just if I had to sum up everything I said, it would probably just be model a lot more. And yes, but like I said, a very limited amount of time. So modeling just happens in the first few seconds of your speech. So you basically say, how do we think this ban is likely to happen? Here are the ways we think it's going to happen. You don't have to write it as policy, just generally like, okay, so firstly we tax it, secondly we do this, thirdly we do that. Yeah. Any questions? If there are no questions, then I think we're done. Um, okay, cool. So yeah, I think you guys can leave then. Thank you for joining. I will.
The debate was won by opposition.
Yeah, debate was won by opposition, but like I said, we didn't have response speeches, so it's not the best verdict ever. So yeah, the only reason was solvency because op was somewhat able to prove that there is some amount of solvency that like it would exacerbate the problem in a sense. So yeah.
Is the debate over?
Yeah, the debate's over.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh my God. Okay. Never mind. Okay. Never mind. Who won?
Opposition. Yeah, Paki.
Opposition won.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Cool. Congrats.